So there's probably a running theme throughout my videos, which is the concept of where Christianity meets politics. That seems to be what interests me and where I sort of dwell in regards to my thinking, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Certainly, considering the where we are nowadays, people are confused. I mean, I know I certainly am about um, how strange everything is, you know. But what helps me is to understand that you basically have two choices. You have two choices between two worldviews. You're going to have a secular, godless worldview, which says there's just chaos and nothing makes sense, really. There's no hope, there's no meaning, there's no purpose, except for maybe what you make of it, you know, arbitrarily. And, or you can say that there is a meaning to life. You know, there's the world, the pain, the struggle that we exist in is birth pangs, and there's a new world coming. Um, and the Bible is here to explain everything in the meantime, right? So that's my worldview. That's what I think. And so what I want to do is I've been meaning to get back into this, and I'm going to do it now. I started in Romans, and I'm going to continue on, hopefully, God willing. And we're going to get to a part which, if there is a key in the Bible to understanding the world, for me, this is it. We're going to do Romans chapter 1, starting in verse 18. And so let's get started now. I'm going to bring up the image of it. I'm going to run through the this part of chapter 1, and then I'm going to go back and I'm just going to discuss everything that in depth and kind of reread it basically. So I hope it's something you're interested in. I hope you stick around for it. And like and share and all that jazz if you do. Romans 1, starting in verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his power, his eternal power, and divine nature have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to their nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women, and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men, and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they knew God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. So, powerful. And I mean, it's just, this is one of the most powerful parts of the Word of God. Paul is, in his letter to the Romans, and in context, I mean, think about what Paul is saying here. Think about what Paul, the reason for the letter itself is that Paul is beginning a church in Rome, which is the epicenter of worldly ideas and natures, right? And I would say America is a continuation of that. So there is no new thing under the sun. It's one of the things in scripture that always comes back to me. It's what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes. There's no new thing under the sun. So you see patterns repeating and things of this nature. Humans are humans. There have always been, you may think, I mean, I'm sure technology is different and things of that nature, but humans are humans. And this is, I mean, how many people have looked at society and said, and I don't even know that you have to be overly Christian, religious, or anything of that nature to look at society and question it and go, I wonder if this is sort of like Sodom and Gomorrah, you know? So let's jump into this. I'm going to kind of go back through this. So starting in verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. And that's something, so just what we talk about as far as, you know, Pontius, as an example, Pontius Pilate stood before Jesus, and he was the ruler he was the Roman representative to the people of Judea at the time. He represented the world. And he stood face to face with Jesus and said, what is truth? That is a secular way of dealing with reality, which is to say, there's almost to feign in ignorance. We don't, you know, your truth, my truth, this postmodernist thinking. It's suppressing the truth. It's exactly what Paul says here. And why? Because who by their unrighteousness suppress truth. I would suggest that it's in unrighteous ways in which they do it, but it's also in unrighteousness out of which that springs forth. It's their unrighteousness. So in John chapter 3, Jesus is speaking to Nicodemus, and he says, this is the judgment. Light has come into the world, but men love darkness rather than the light because their deeds are evil. And this is the same thing that Paul's building on now. That men suppress the truth because of unrighteousness, and then it causes them to do unrighteous things. So it's a vicious circle of evil. So for what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. So he's starting automatically to tell you this ignorance, this feigning of ignorance, like what is truth? You know, God doesn't exist and all this stuff that the secular people use as an excuse. And when I say that, I don't mean to say that they're not genuine in when they say it to you, but understand that what they're doing is they're self-deluding. You ever known somebody who lies and you knew they lied, but it almost seemed like they didn't know they lied? So that's what happens. This is this idea where you end up believing it's a coping mechanism. You want to do evil so badly, I suppose, or you want things to go your own way. You want to be your own God, ultimately. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take in information, compartmentalize things to find a way around the idea of the morality and the standard that God has set, because ultimately you cannot meet that standard. Everybody cannot meet the standard. Only one person did, and it's not about meeting the standard so much. It's about whether or not you throw the standard out. Do you say, I failed to meet the standard, or do you say the standard failed to meet me? The standard's not worthy of me even attempting. You see the difference there? Everyone fails. The difference is humility. Do you, in pride, say the standard is irrelevant, God is irrelevant, and therefore God must not exist? I don't need God. This sort of thing. This is the mindset that's being created here. And you can see this in our world. That's why this is so powerful. So, 20. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. It's important to understand what he's saying here. Talking about the physical world. Because what often is a stumbling block for us all, if we're being honest, is this concept that God is invisible. And so it's very difficult, I think, for us in the physical realm to, to think about this concept of having a relationship with a God who's invisible, or coming up under the authority of somebody who's invisible. One of the things I've said before is that the secular, humanist mindset, atheistic type person will, in their rush to dethrone God from his proper authority over their life, will then rush to replace an invisible, perfectly good God with a visible, terrible leader. And you see that. One of the last videos I did was talking about that concept, the philosophical idea of why this happens. But so continuing in verse 22, claiming to be wise. Where did I stop at? Actually, let's see. 21. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give him thanks, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. So that's saying it's a process. They started with this desire, and they just kept going with it. And it's a futile thinking. It's pointless. It doesn't actually go anywhere. And if you look at our society, it's sort of like that, right? Where you got all these people, they will say one thing, and then they'll just abandon that position that they so strongly held just a month ago because the new thing is out. And the TV and the media is now telling them this. And they don't believe in anything, so they fall for everything. It's that sort of concept. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. And this is something, of course, this is what society is, right? Because the university system should be the intelligent people. It's completely secular at this point. And yet all the nonsense that infects our culture, most of the nonsense that affects our culture is either the product of the university system, or is exacerbated by the university system, or is given this air of academia. It's justified. It doesn't matter how silly it is. Intelligence is different than wisdom. Somebody who's intelligent, you can create something that could destroy the world. Whoever could do that would be smart, intelligent, but would it be wise? And that's kind of a far-fetched example, but it gives, I think, the point, which is to say that intelligence, you could take a dumb thing, and if a smart person knows is very good rhetorically, they could make it sound like it makes sense. And you'd have to really think about it before you understood that doesn't actually make sense. And in fact, when you start looking at it logically, some of this stuff could never make sense and will never make sense. And when it's applied, it fails. And then they keep doing it, even though you go, well, yeah, it failed because it was never going to succeed because it was illogical. But you've got all these people patting themselves on the back, thinking of themselves as these great intellectuals, and this big, what do they call that? I forget the term, where they're just saying the same thing, echo chamber, where they're in this like academic echo chamber where they just assume, well, everybody here is smart, therefore somebody would correct me, and they think, absolutely, we're so much smarter than the rubes out there. But they don't realize they're super biased, and their bias has made them fools. Their hearts are darkened. They've exchanged normal thinking for futile thinking. And exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Now, this part here is interesting because I don't know how many people apply this the way that I do. So let me repeat this. So, claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. So Paul is talking about false religion. So there is an exchange of the idea of God. Exchange the glory of the immortal God. For one thing, what he is saying is that they become fools because they've exchanged this. Why? Because they don't look at themselves as the image of God. This is what Christians have in their philosophy on life. Even though we're fallen, we were made in the image of God. The secular world doesn't believe that. The secular world, what do they say? They say we are made in the image of monkeys. You see the big difference there. And you may go, well, that was something that was created by Darwin. I would say that's always been a spirit in the world, a false antichrist spirit. In Paul's day, it probably looked more in terms of like what you might imagine an idolatrous sort of religion would be. A perfect example of this is maybe in India, where the gods, the images of the gods have animalistic traits in the statues, right? So Paul may have this sort of in mind as an example, but you see how true it is even to this day. Again, there's no new thing under the sun. They've taken what was a religious spirit of an animalistic, ritualistic hedonism and transformed it and put a veneer of academia over it. And Darwin, as an example, was a theological guy. He wasn't a science major. His degree was in theology. It wasn't even in science. It wasn't in biology or zoology or any of this stuff. And in truth, the world will tell you, make it seem like he stepped off of a boat and just was smacked with the reality of evolution. That's not what happened at all. He was reading a book, was influenced by a book about geology that was attempting to overturn what everybody believed at the time, which matched the Bible, by a guy named Charles Lyell. And Charles Lyell wasn't even a geologist either. He was a lawyer. So you see how there's this veneer of academia to it. Now, I'm not saying that's because somebody's station or degree means they can't give you truth. Does the truth match, right? Does that make sense? Does it make sense to you that we're just monkeys? That's where you, and which side does it go on, right? There's two paradigms. Are you in the God paradigm or are you in the animal paradigm? You know, um, have you exchanged the glory of God for the image that resembles man and birds and animals, basically? All right, 24. Therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshiped and served a creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So, um, and you see the physical degradation that is starting to take place. So, what comes from the heart then is now manifested in the body. That think about it in this way: dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. And I've said that they are sort of trying to jump on what Paul's saying here, or exchanging the idea of the image of God. Would you treat your neighbor better if you had that mindset, that that's actually somebody made in the image of God? If that's what you believed and you walked it. If you thought that about yourself. Remember, the golden rule isn't that you treat people better than you. It's that you treat people as you would treat yourself. Jesus isn't even saying to debase yourself among people. He's saying treat people like you would want to be treated, equal. And if you think you're in the image of God and you think they're in the image of God, you are not going to dishonor people. Right now, we have the debate about abortion. Roe versus Wade just got overturned, kicking it back to the states. And we're going to see the nation split apart. Who's going to be the ones who say, we're not going to dishonor our fellow man? We are going to honor the image of God, that what is in every mother is the image of God, and that's how we treat everybody in the womb and then outside of the womb as well. And that's a big issue, because the paradigm that is created when you throw God out puts you in this futile thinking where you then dishonor the body. And that's just one way, right? So 26, for this reason God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. So, and you know, it delves into controversy, obviously. I mean, the Bible is just talking about, but who's making it controversial, right? I mean, if you're going to tolerate people to have diverse views, then we need to do that. And one of the diverse views in our multicultural society is a biblical one. As a Christian, I don't apply the Bible to others. Now, abortion, I'm not even calling that biblical. That's just not killing people. That seems to me to be the very bottom of law and how law is supposed to work. I mean, if you don't have that, I don't know how you even have a functional society at that point. So it's not even biblical. When it comes to sexuality, you know, that's more of a fluid situation in terms of culture, right? Maybe some cultures think it's fine, some cultures, whatever. But as an individual, do what you want. I mean, you'll pay the penalty. And I think that in our society, what I'm driving at is, I don't look at an individual who struggles with that and think it's necessarily any worse than anything anyone else struggles with. But it is a example of what societies will become when they're godless. And unfortunately, my opinion is that they exist, that this that homosexuality becomes more and more pervasive. One of the things, since I'm on the subject, one of the things that the way that I look at it is this: Peter says that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was that they didn't have love for one another. Very interesting, because in our day, if you remember that movie Philadelphia, was about a guy who had AIDS, and the word means brotherly love, and you said this idea of man love, this sort of thing. But Peter says the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was that they didn't actually have brotherly love. And so you see how what Paul says here is that they became dishonoring their bodies among themselves, right? And because in this mindset, you tend to look at just, somebody as a piece of meat, but the thing that I'm trying to bring out is this idea of why does it fall on one individual, and what does that have to do with brotherly love? Well, if you're selfish and you're twisted, then you can see how you might abuse another. And it does appear that, and this isn't the case for everybody, I don't believe, but one of the issues that we end up dealing with, or one of the reasons that causes somebody to struggle, is that they were abused as a child. And it doesn't have to be physical or sexual abuse, but it does manifest from that for sure. But just the idea of maybe the boy that lacks the father figure and is attempting to replace that, and when puberty hits, there might be this issue of seeking what affection you didn't get from your father from a man in an inappropriate way. I mean, this is just my thoughts on trying to grapple with. And so you could see also that in a society where, and we see this today, right? The LGBTQ plus, I'm going to say the plus is pedophilia. I mean, that's what they're headed for. You can see this, right? It is something that has been an undercurrent for a long time. They're pushing for this idea to lower the age. And you could see how that's going to create more and more people who struggle. And they're doing it, they're grooming kids in schools. It's a confusing time as it is. And then you're going to set them on a path that otherwise they may have never gone down. And that's evil. So you can see how a society that lacks simple brotherly love will become a society that becomes more indecent sexually. And I believe that's what Paul is saying here. 28. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. Covetousness. I talk about this in a political realm, and this isn't to say, and I bag on the Democrats, and rightly so. This isn't to say the Republicans are a bastion of any goodness, by the way. It's just to say that on a platform level, the Democrats stand for the badness. Covetousness. Why do people vote for Democrats? Because they want life to be fair, economically. is a big part of it, right? There's a bunch of people who have a lot more money than you, and that's not fair. It's coveting somebody else's property. And that's a spirit that isn't good. Nothing good comes out of that. And you see what happens here. So a society that promotes ungodliness will covet each other's property, will covet each other's body, will look at each other as just as a something that can be used for profit or pleasure, or fill in the blank, whatever you need or feel you need at the time. There is no morality check to create a society filled with individuals when godliness isn't a part of it. Goes on to say they are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. A lot of that stuff, I would say, the deceit part, I think of the Republicans. These guys are guys and gals pretend to be on the side of what's right, platform wise, but weak, always finding a way to back out, always finding a way not to do what's right. It appears, it usually is anyway. So they are gossips, slanderers, haters of God. So all that right there kind of reminds you of the media. Gossips, slanderers, haters of God, controlling people's thoughts and minds through trickery. Gossips and slanders, right? Defaming somebody, calling somebody a racist, calling somebody a sexist, calling somebody a homophobe, all these things that they throw, slandering people with. Is that not what you see in society? Insolent, haughty, boastful. Haughty and boastful. I mean, this concept of, just very prideful nature of our society. We're so dumb in so many ways, and yet we run around thinking that we're great. America has this problem for sure. We don't think any of the problems that we've seen in history and other places could possibly happen to us. Why, there could never be a problem with the way elections are done. That could never happen here. Inventors of evil, disobedient to parents. So inventors of evil, new things. We're just coming up with new ways to be evil. Does it not seem like there's a new thing every time you turn around? This is as far as we could go. Nope, there's something new the next week, right? Disobedient to parents. How about disobedient, when you say parents, how about to elders? How about to the past generations? How about to those who came before us? Those who created the prosperity that we have? Is that not what we're seeing now? We debase we pull down statues. Oh, those people were racist. Those people were hateful. Those people were religious bigots. Fill in the blank, right? Disobedient, disrespectful to. Now, if they're not worthy of respect, it's a conversation. But that's what we're seeing, right? And of course, disobedient to parents. Hillary Clinton, says it takes a village, right? How aren't we seeing that with the school situation? They're literally grooming kids. They don't care what you say as a parent. I took my kids out of school. I never had them in school for that reason. I saw the writing on the wall. I mean, it's a place of indoctrination. It was when I went to school, and it's only gotten worse. So Um, it's it's a direct representation of the problems of society, and they feed it to your kids. Um, Foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless, though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. Provide cover, educate people in the in why misery loves company. That's a simple way to look at it. Misery loves company. Inwardly, we all know the moral check that's within us. When you see somebody outwardly, overtly being, when you see like people running around, some guy twerking in his underwear in front of a child, or this sort of ridiculousness that's going on, that is a call to society. It's a call for that individual that they know deep inside something's wrong, and they're just gonna go crazy until somebody says something about it or goes with them. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it, or I don't know any other way to see it. It's a psychological situation, right? Everybody, I mean, everybody has a way of understanding things, and that's the way I'm saying it right now. And society, and this, what Paul is talking about, matches what we are seeing in society, which is to say, a godless society, a society that has done all these things, is doing all these things, is promoting all the things that are anti-God, anti-Christ. People can claim, oh, there's no God. Well, you want to get caught up in all these nuanced arguments. I can dive into that stuff. Trust me, I can dive into those nuanced arguments, but uh, there's no hiding from this aspect of it. Um, People are seeing things now. You're not able to hide in the middle area. No, this is one of the things that might be a benefit to the craziness that's going on. I think the church is shrinking to a certain extent, but I think the church is going to get um, more holy, more righteous. And I think people who have been sitting on the sidelines spectating are going to not be able to do that for very much longer. You are going to be pulled to one side or the other. That polarization you're seeing is going to cause you to choose. And there's so many people right now straddling the fence. The moral nature of this, I don't even know what you call it, catastrophe that's taking place now in our society, is not going to allow people to just sit there and not see the truth anymore. Either you're going to run and join the crazies, or you're going to say, all right, God, you're real. I get it now. I'm sorry. And that's my hope anyway. So that's the end of Romans 1. Um, I'll leave it there. And like I said, hopefully you stayed to the end and got something out of it. But and if you did, like, share, and until next time, I will see you later.